I just want to reflect for a minute on what we just went over with the history of feminism and the involvement of feminism with these kinds of colonial and imperial powers. This is how feminism started from the very beginning up until now. And I think it's just so outrageous that these feminists portray themselves as counterculture, counter establishment. These feminists portray themselves as victims when in fact they are and they have been in such positions of power, and in a very malicious way, they have been imposing all kinds of death and destruction and evil on the entirety of the globe. This is what liberalism is all about, and this is what feminism is all about. Yet they have the audacity to portray themselves as these victims, as these kind of disenfranchised activists who are trying to make a better world. No, you are destroying the world. You are disrupting the world. And you have been a part of these colonial projects, the imperial project, up until this day. And you are working hand in hand with such evil organizations as the CIA or the FBI or American empire as a whole. And you have no shame in this kind of allyship, or you have nothing to say against the fact that your discourse of women's rights and liberating women is being used and has been used in very recent history to kill millions. Just look at the invasion of Iraq, the Iraq War, the invasion of Afghanistan, Muslim countries that were bombed and were attacked, entire villages completely wiped out. And what was that justified on the basis of? Liberating brown women from brown men. This feminist ideology, which has been at the core of feminism from the zero wave up until now. The death and destruction doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. It just has this continuation. It's a never-ending nightmare that feminism produces, that liberalism produces. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to call a spade a spade. We're not going to let these feminists get away with their outrageous lie, we're not going to allow them to portray themselves as these saviors of humanity or these saviors of womankind. No, they're not. And we can see that just from the history. We can see that from their origins, past and present. It's a continued theme. It's not even like you can say, oh, in the past they were really bad, but now they have learned their lesson and they are... this is what the decolonial, intersectional feminists will try to claim as, oh, we put white feminism aside and now feminism is this tolerant intersectional project. Okay, tell that to the CIA. Tell that to the, Department of Homeland Security and all of these other agencies that are taking from feminist guidelines on social justice and women's rights. Tell that to George Bush and Colin Powell and Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney when they were proposing the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. Tell them, how benign feminism is. Okay, tell the families that are being destroyed about how benign feminism is. So I just wanted to make that very clear before we move on to another topic, which is biology. So we have to talk about biology because a lot of feminism is about denying biology and being ignorant about biology. So there's always this question of nature versus nurture. How much of what we are as human beings is due to just our nature, how we were created, and how much of it is due to how we were raised? And I think Islamically, we acknowledge that nature has a major role. The way that Allah has created us, that is a huge part of who we are, but there's also nurture, how you are raised, and the decisions that you make, the decisions that your parents made, the environment that you're in, if you're in a good environment or a bad environment, that can influence how you end up. So Islam acknowledges the role of both nature and nurture, but feminists beg to differ. They say that gender differences are just a social construction that are inherited from society, and anything that anytime there is some unequal outcome or some disparity between women and men in terms of status or outcomes or whatever, then this must be the result of some kind of prejudice, some kind of bias, some kind of socialization that we have to eliminate, we have to get rid of. But the reality is that gender differences are, in large part, biological. There's no way that you can socialize a person to change their chromosomes. There is no way you can socialize a male to become pregnant. There's no way you can socialize a male to lactate. There's no way you can socialize women to have male genitalia. You can't socialize that. You can try to do certain kinds of operational procedures, sex change surgery, quote unquote sex change. But even that is not going to change the chromosomes. It's not going to be, sometimes every now and then you see news where they said, oh, the first man to get pregnant, or another man has gotten pregnant. No, these are not men, these are biological females, and you're just calling them men because that's their preferred pronoun or that's their chosen gender. But we don't accept, that there's any actual change ontologically. They haven't actually physically become a pregnant male. No, you're only playing with the terminology. So in Hero's Call, our course on masculinity, you can go and watch that, which has all kinds of details on the biological nature of the differences between male and female. And it's everything from hormones to physiology to psychology, personality differences. And one of the articles that are cited, it's like a meta study, gender differences in personality traits across cultures, robust and surprising findings. I don't know how surprising the findings are. I think it's pretty obvious that males and men and women have differences in personality traits, and this is seen across cultures. So if it's something that is found across cultures, how could it be a product of socialization? Cultures are very different. They're vastly different, in fact, in many ways, yet they have certain things that are universal across cultures, and one of those things happens to be gender differences and different personality traits between males and females. So the science is very clear, reality is very clear that men and women are ontologically different in terms of who they are, their essence. There is a big difference, and this is something that is underwritten by revelation and what Allah says in the Quran, and Allah's creation is very clear. Men are not the same as women. There's clear, important differences biologically in our physical bodies and even in our souls, and even in how Allah has created our soul, our personality, our psyche. These are differences between the genders. So you have some radical feminists that will make this claim that there's no such thing as biological sex. The two biggest feminists who are associated with this argument are Judith Butler in her book Gender Trouble, and also Donna Haraway, who writes about cyborgs, the feminist cyborg. And their argument is basically that even the idea of male and female is a social construction. Why? Because you have cultures that have more than two sexes. You have certain Native American cultures or certain tribal cultures that will have a third sex or a double sex, like two-spirit having male and female. So the fact that other cultures can have multiple genders, or like Hinduism acknowledges multiple genders, some say Judaism acknowledges more than two genders. This shows that even biological sex is a social construction. And they'll say that if you look at biology, there are individuals who will not just have a double X chromosome or XY chromosome for males, double X for females. They'll have XXY chromosome or XYY chromosome or some combination thereof. And this shows that you have a lot of variety when it comes to the genetics of a person, or even when it comes to genitalia or secondary sex characteristics of people. You can have intersex individuals, hermaphrodite individuals. This shows that the idea that there's only two distinct categories of biological sex, this is something that is not natural. It's something that's imposed according to social convention. But this is something ridiculous. Just because there are deviations of a norm, that doesn't mean that the norm doesn't exist. Just because there are exceptions to the rule does not mean that the rule does not exist. And there can be exceptions to everything. That doesn't mean that there's no regularity, that there is no conformity with rules and basic laws of nature. The exceptions don't disprove the rule. And this is something that disproves the entire feminist argument against the existence of biological sex. So more details can be found in Hero's Call, our course at LSNAM. So even biological sex is a social construction. No such thing as a female identity. It's interesting because this idea of abolishing sex, biological sex, this poses a problem for feminism, actually. And there's this conflict between transgenderism and previous feminist thought. So what the second wave feminists, if you recall, one of their arguments was that the entire idea of gender is a social construction. The idea that women are soft and delicate and gentle and merciful, this is just a social construction. It's a myth that's been created. There's no essence to being a woman. But what does the transgender person say? The biological male who claims that he's a woman, they will say that, well, I just feel like a woman. They'll say, I just feel like a woman. I like the color pink. I like to have long, dainty hair. I like to dress in a skirt. I like to wear high heels. So that means that I'm really a woman because I feel like a woman. But the second wave feminists will say, well, what does it mean to feel like a woman? That's only a social construction. You've been indoctrinated to think that being a woman means liking to wear high heels and lipstick and being gentle or whatever. So you have this conflict between these second wave style feminists and the transgender movement. And the transgender movement has a term for these feminists. They call them TERFs. TERFs. And what that stands for is Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. So you might be aware of news recently, in recent years, about these TERFs. One of the most prominent TERF in the world is a woman named J.K. Rowling. And she's a popular children's author. She wrote these Harry Potter books that you might be aware of. But she has been maligned as a TERF. Why? Because she says that, there's a difference between men and women, and their biological sex is a reality. And you can't say things like men can get pregnant, for example. These are the radical positions of J.K. Rowling, and she has been canceled as a TERF because of her beliefs on gender. But J.K. Rowling considers herself a feminist, She's pro-gay. She has gay characters that she's writing about in these children's books. She's pro women's rights. She considers the patriarchy an evil thing that needs to be abolished. She doesn't think that a woman's place is in the home. She doesn't think that women should be saddled with the responsibility of raising children or cooking or cleaning or maintaining domestic lifestyle. She disagrees with all of that. She thinks that women should be marching and women need to be strong and independent. She embodies all of these typical feminist values, but she has been canceled. Why? Because she thinks that there is such a thing as being a male and there's such a thing as being a female. That's how crazy the world is. The world that we're living in. I mean, if you don't laugh, you have to cry, right? Now the issue of technology, biotech. Very critical for liberalism and very critical for feminism as well. Because at a certain point, feminists have to acknowledge the reality of biology. That, yes, there are differences when it comes to hormones, when it comes to physiology. Men are just bigger, men are stronger. In terms of intelligence, there are some differences between men and women that we discussed in depth in the course Vanishing Throne. So how about if we use technology to actually change biology? Maybe we can use technology to get rid of any and all gender differences. This is something that feminists are advocating. So hormones. How about we give children hormone treatment, hormone replacement treatment, so that we can make sure that children who identify as the different than their birth sex, how about we give them hormones? So little John can become Jean. Little Billy can become Jane. Whatever. This is something that is going on currently. Children are being given hormones to match their chosen identities. This is something shocking. This is chemical castration, basically, because what happens when you disrupt the natural hormones in the course of childhood development, this causes permanent damage to the body of a growing child, growing adolescent. And there are just these horror stories you can look up on the internet before they take it down, actually, because a lot of these sites and videos are being blocked. But look up trans regret, post-op regret when it comes to sex change and gender bending operations. There's a lot of regret because it's permanent. If you castrate yourself, that's permanent. If you mutilate your body, that's permanent. There's nothing that can change that. But this is because of technology. Technology has allowed these kinds of operations to take place where you are castrating yourself or you're mutilating your body to make it appear or look more like the opposite sex or your chosen sex. Or these hormones that you're taking, that's a pharmaceutical treatment. That's technology that is allowing you to permanently, a male who is getting estrogen treatment, the bones of that child are not going to develop the way that a male bone structure is going to develop. So you will have these males, biological males, that actually have the bone structure of females. Will have the kind of personality, the voice of a female, even though they're a biological male. And so they're getting better and better at these kinds of cosmetic changes to make males look more like females and vice versa. So this is satanic. This is all satanic. But this is what Satan has promised. And Allah quotes Satan in the Quran saying that Satan is going to attack humanity and humiliate humanity and change the creation of Allah. And this is one of the biggest changes, to conflate gender and to attack and undermine gender differences. Allah has created us in pairs and with significant differences between male and female, and Shaitan is trying to undermine that. And this transgenderism, LGBT, is in the current day one of the main methods that he is doing that. Shayateen of jinn and also ins. Humans also can be shayateen. But technology is being used now, medically, pharmaceutically. But so far it's only superficial things, but technology can get more advanced. And so you have this feminist techno-science. People like Donna Haraway that we mentioned already talk about this. Judith Butler talks about this. What if we can use gene therapy to actually change the genetic structure and get rid of gender differences that way? Create a more equal society that way through gene editing. That could be within the near future. And you have this other feminist, Judy Wajman, who argues that technology began as something feminine but was overtaken by men. So her argument is actually kind of silly. She says that, well, technology in the hunter and gatherer days, or in the very early agrarian societies, it was women who were tilling the fields. It was women who were using thread and needle to create clothing and to mend clothing. It was women who developed cooking technologies. It was women who were in charge of treating wounds. So like early medicine was a woman's field. Things like this. Technology was feminine. And then the Industrial Revolution created this masculine dominance over technology. Technology began to be used for mass destruction and mass production. And so all of these evils that we see with pollution and climate change, this is the masculinization of technology. So we need to return to the pure roots of technology as a feminine project. And if we do that, then technology can be a force for good, an equalizing force for the progress of humanity. And this is showing how feminism is intertwined with technology in this very precarious or a very dangerous way. What does this mean for the future of humanity? Imagine you want to create equality between the genders. You want to change or dissolve gender roles. You want an androgynous future. Well, if you can manipulate the genetic structure of human beings, if you can manipulate the hormones of human beings, if you can literally go and change the psychology of people because you're giving them certain drugs to make the genders more even. And the feminists will argue that, look, this is something necessary. If we want to have equality between the sexes, then we are required to do these kinds of technological manipulations for the sake of equality, for the sake of justice. If we finally want to destroy the patriarchy, we have to go into the womb and manipulate people's DNA. The feminists are already thinking and talking about along those lines. People like Judy Wajman, Judith Butler, Donna Haraway, and so forth. This is biotechnology, feminist technoscience, and liberals are all on board with this. And the proof of this is what they're doing with so-called transgender children, where they're willing to inject children with hormones, even subject them sometimes to sex change operations, because that's their chosen gender. You also have figures, we mentioned Firestone, Shilamuth Firestone, and they'll talk about how biology is a big source of inequality. Biology is what is requiring women to get pregnant and go through labor for the purpose of reproduction. This is a source of inequality because when a woman is pregnant, she is weaker, she's more vulnerable, she can't go and be a career woman, she can't be independent, she relies on a man in that state of pregnancy. Pregnancy is a lot of resources that a woman has to give up or spend in order to deliver that child after 9 months. 9 months of suffering. This is how the feminists will talk about it. So this is a structural inequality that can be addressed by technology. Now you have artificial wombs. You have the ability to artificially inseminate, fertilize eggs. So that these technologies can actually create more equality because women won't be saddled with the burden of pregnancy and labor and also, nursing. That issue has actually been addressed a long time ago because now you have formula. You have this kind of baby formula that is a synthetic product that you feed the baby instead of having to nurse the baby. That means that, great, you don't have to rely on a wet nurse, you don't have to rely on a mother. Women are more independent now because they don't have to nurse children. This is technology. That's a synthetic formula that technology has created. And now you have artificial insemination. So women don't have to be burdened with having a husband. Women don't have to be even burdened with having a partner. They can have a child without any of that. That's lifting a lot of their burden. And then there is now artificial wombs. So even the act of carrying a baby is not necessary. Like, you don't have to have a mother who goes through that. So you have feminists like Shilamuth who will say that this is what is needed to create an equal society, because we can't have women burdened by reproduction and labor. We need to have this artificial system through technology to sustain the human race. Their perpetuation of the human race should happen purely through technology. It might sound like science fiction, but a lot of this stuff is now a reality. Shilamuth was writing in the 70s, and she had no idea that this technology could exist. She was just imagining a future where technology could produce this kind of artificial labor. But now artificial wombs do exist, and many are advocating for the use of artificial wombs for human beings. It's been proven to be effective for like a farm animal, like a lamb or sheep. Now they want to use it for human beings. So this is, I don't know about you, but this sounds like a nightmare. This sounds like a dystopian nightmare that feminists are trying to create for humanity. But it's because of technology. And again, this is if you take feminism to its logical conclusion, where you want to create absolute equality for all of society, then you have to change biology. You have to change human biology, because human biology will not allow perfect equality, because there are differences, significant differences between the genders, and these genders require institutions that are hierarchical, institutions that have gender roles embedded within them. That's a requirement because of biology. That's what's creating the unequal outcomes that the feminists are so concerned with. So to actually abolish the patriarchy, you have to abolish human nature. To abolish hierarchy, you have to abolish the human genome. This is the conclusion that many feminists have realized and recognized. Shilamuth being one of them, but many others. And this is the kind of project that they have for humanity. Yet you have some Muslims who want to say that, oh, feminism is completely compatible with Islam. This is delusion. So in the next module, inshallah, we're going to talk about marriage and how feminism destroys that as well.